Jeff is here, so the entire committee is in right now.
Yep.
I'm going to run through the initial things that we had on the agenda. If Marlene will tell us what's first.
So first, approval of minutes.
Okay, everybody get the minutes?
Yes.
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 Can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Voting so ordered.
Okay. The second
Marlene.
item is the tour with Bob Comeau.
Okay.
And I have a call and an email into him with 2 suggested dates based on the doodle poll that we did of either Wednesday, May 19th or Friday, May 21st at 4 in the afternoon, but waiting to hear back from him. I gave him the 2 best times that we had.
Wednesday the 19th.
Or Friday the 21st.
At 4 o'clock?
Yep.
Okay. Is Kate next with the report on Pioneer Valley?
Kate is next. Kate, you're next.
I'm here. So I got the information into the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, and I spoke with Karin, who's the person who is going to do the research for us. We talked through the list. She's ready to go. It does look like they'll only have 6 hours in this fiscal year, but then again, the fiscal year is over in 2 months. So she will at least get the first 6 hours done, and then should be able to do the other 9 hours in July probably. And she is talking with other folks there about some ideas that she had for other ways that we can get further funding, assuming that we will not be able to do everything that we want to do in 15 hours, but I'll have more information about that probably next time we meet. But they're really excited about this project. So I think that the likelihood of them being able to help us figure out something more seems high.
Great. Okay. Marlene, what's next?
Next is you, Hoyer Gas and Electric.
Okay. I've spoken to Jim Lavelle. They are definitely going to be joining us at our next meeting.
Oh, great.
They'll have a representative with us who can talk about what they're doing and then stick with us for as long as we need them.
Sue Ellen, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Michael Curtin from Hoyle Gas and Electric.
Oh, great.
Jim, I spoke with Jim this afternoon, and I've been volunteered for this. So you've got me. And I think Jim had responded fairly late in the day, just letting you know that I was going to be on the call. But because I'm just getting onto the project now, I would prefer to take this meeting and the May 18th meeting as just sort of an observer standpoint from my end and try to get up to speed as much as I can on the project. Then I know originally your email to Jim was for someone from the Gas and Electric to be on your June 1st meeting, and that will likely be me as well.
Great. Michael, do you have an email address?
Yes, it's M as in Michael, CURTIN at hged.com. I have the email from Jim. He copied me on it, so I can reach out to you after this and just shoot you my contact info, which will have my work phone, my cell phone, that information for you.
Great. That would be very good. Thank you and welcome aboard.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Hi, Kip.
Go ahead.
No, I went to school with Kip, elementary school and junior high, so we've known each other for a long time. I was just saying hi to Kip. I thought I saw him on the call earlier.
Here, Mike. Nice to see you.
He's there.
Wondered if this was the Michael Curtin that was going to be joining us.
That's me.
Nice.
That's fun.
You can tell us stories. So the next one is just a general discussion of prior information, and that might be helpful for for Michael to get up to speed on what we've been talking about anyway, but we were going to just generally chat about the Quarry, Boys and Girls Club, and other issues and problems and opportunities we heard from the abutters and neighbors.
Okay. I have taken the step of asking Mimi Panitch, where are you, Mim?
He's right there. Hi, Mimi, how are you?
Good, how are you? I'm kind of multitasking here, but I am listening.
Mimi has agreed to give us an update on what's going on with the Quarry and the Mount Tom property. So I'm going to give her a few minutes to do just that. I think it'll be helpful for everybody because she's got a better handle on it, certainly than I do, and probably than anybody else does.
Well, that is high praise that I'm not sure I can live up to, but here's the deal that as best I can tell. And just as background, I am very informally involved with this. Basically, Rosemary Arnold at the Kestrel Trust reached out to me back in December saying, do you understand what the deal is with this Boys and Girls Club transaction? And in the process of trying to figure out what the deal was, I wound up just having followed the issue closely and now know probably both too little and too much about what's going on. But here are the basics. You know, as I'm sure you guys all know, back in 2019 or so, the Mount Tom Corporation, which owns the ski slope property or what remains of it, was bought by our local friends, Matt Donahue and Pat Kennedy. And they had the idea, based in part, I think, on the old Conway study, of using it as a construction waste fill until it was full enough to basically put the slope back the way it was, replant it, etc. The wrinkles on this from the public's point of view are that, you know, the construction fill is regulated by the state of Massachusetts. Jeff probably knows more about precisely how clean it really is than I do. My impression has been that yes, you know, it is regulated for the materials that the state looks at and tests for, that obviously this doesn't catch the materials that may be hazardous that we don't regulate, or that we will learn were hazardous in the future, not like that has never happened in the past. The amounts that can be in the fill that they test for are regulated. The process is, I think, you know, both careful and prone to accident. You know, there have been accidents across the Commonwealth where things got into fills that shouldn't. But that was the idea. And it turned out, you know, after they had acquired the corporation, that, you know, they had not been aware of the state's right to take it. And, you know, the state had essentially bought it back in 2002 with the idea that eventually quarrying would halt. And as best I understand it, they were going to then monitor, and at any point after one of the stated events, including it being mid-2022, or I'm sorry, mid-2012 when quarrying ceased, they basically could send Mount Tom Corporation 90 days notice, and they would then be obligated to transfer title to the state. And DCR, having looked at the quarry as it exists now, as opposed to 2012, looked at this probably in December or so and sent out its notice of acquisition. And they had various studies that they needed to do to be sure that they were going to go ahead with this. But they all came up with, yes, you know, we want to preserve it in its current form. It is habitat for species that don't occur otherwise on the mountain. They have observed peregrine falcons nesting on the cliffs. The water drainage, which I know they checked fairly recently, you know, does seem to indicate that it goes into our groundwater and into our water supplies. And, you know, to the best of my understanding, because I have not talked directly to anyone from DCR, their feeling was very much that, the merits of construction waste fell aside. The time for attempting to put it back the way it had been was long past from a conservationist's point of view. So meanwhile, of course, the group attempting to do the landfill project had acquired the property of the Holyoke Boys and Girls Club at Mount Tom. And that is a whole saga that I think we need not go into now. But DCR had attempted to exercise its option to purchase that property and failed for a bunch of reasons having to do with, I think, just accidents, both at the Boys and Girls Club and at City Council. But they still would like to acquire that property. It just is not in their hands. It is in the hands of Mount Tom Company and Site Reclamation, both of which are owned by Matt and Pat jointly, and both of which are working on this project. So the most recent episode of this is that come the day that the 90-day notice was supposed to expire and title was supposed to be handed over, Mount Tom Companies filed for bankruptcy. And they did this, it seems likely, I can't speak for them, I haven't talked to them either, but clearly part of the point was to trigger the automatic stay of any actions in bankruptcy so they could hang on to the property while we argue, or they argue, about whose it actually is. There was a hearing that I'm sure you all saw the Mass Live article. They covered this back on Friday, where DCR and the state made it very clear that they want the quarry, they want to leave it as it is with some safety addition. And Mount Tom Companies made it clear that they expect to litigate title to the quarry property. They are not willing to sit back and let the state take it. They have a legal theory that the courts are going to have to decide. So right now, the quarry is basically in limbo. There's a bankruptcy trustee, there is a case number. Where it goes from here, I think we just have to wait and see. The next step is going to be for Mount Tom Company to file whatever action it has to file with whatever supporting legal arguments to make its case that the state's interest in this ought to be set aside, and the state will respond to it, or possibly, who knows, file its own claim saying, this is ours, now give it to us. But that's where we are. And I don't think at this point anyone has any idea how long it's going to take this case to get resolved or for anyone to know what's going to happen. We do know basically what the true fates of the quarry are, which are either DCR takes it, puts it into preservation and recreational use roughly as it is, or Mount Tom Companies takes it, attempts to pursue its project, which would still need certain state permitting that it hasn't applied for yet and can't, I don't think, now. But if approved, they intend to obviously have a whole lot of heavy trucks bringing things up and down that road and filling the quarry. The impact, I think, on the neighbors is likely to be substantial, although I understand that Kip, who knows the business, could probably speak to that better than any of us, just because he knows the business. But that's where we are. I honestly don't know what they expect to do with the Boys and Girls Club property in the interim. The conservation restriction on that property is extremely strict, and I don't see how they could stage anything from there. But as far as I know, that hasn't come up anywhere yet, not in city council, not before the court, nowhere. And that's the briefing, unless anybody has any questions.
So I can add just a few things, and then maybe Kip can add a couple things. So the Mount Tom Companies did file what's called an ANRAD. Basically, that's an abbreviated notice of resource area delineation to the Conservation Commission. So basically, it's a pretty rare thing. Normally, you have to come in and basically request a permit for a certain activity to determine whether it's in wetland resources or not. In this case, they filed this request to find out exactly where to have the wetland resources on the property delineated so they could know what they could do. So that's what they filed. And so there was a determination indeed that there were wetland resources, bordering lands adjacent to vegetated wetlands on, in that quarry property. And my understanding was then that so that would require them to be able to mitigate that if they were able to do something. And where it's located is kind of at the lower end of the, at the downstream, at the lowest elevation of the quarry. So that means if they were going to go fill that, they would have to destroy that wetland, and therefore they would have to mitigate it somewhere else. Now, these aren't pristine wetlands. Obviously, this was a quarry previously. And so at any rate, so my understanding is the reason they needed to purchase the Boys and Girls Club was that they would need that for potential mitigation. And I forget the exact acreage. It's only a few acres, but it's enough that, and again, in the case of destroying the wetland, oftentimes there's treble damages, so you could require 3 times the amount of acreage actually destroyed to be recreated. But there obviously is, DC, so Natural Heritage came in, and there obviously are resources there now, and there is a natural community regrowing there. It's not the community that was there before. It's mostly aspen and much more disturbance-based species, but they are there. And one of the things, and one thing about the ANRAD filing is for most filings, you have to tell the Conservation Commission exactly what you're going to do. In the case of an ANRAD filing, this abbreviated Notice of Resource Area Delineation, they did not have to explain anything about the project. So, it's basically no questions asked. And so now Matt and Pat were very clear that they wanted to fill this and return it to their, to its original contours. They said, in the past, these kinds of operations would have been required to have that done. And that's true under some circumstances. And they said it would be very clean fill. Now, again, as Mimi pointed out, all kinds of things can go into these fill operations. And once they're in there, I mean, we have the reservoir right downstream. This is a gem of Holyoke, and it's a pretty significant risk to consider that there. And again, the recreation use there would be, just based on where the roads are, the impact for 20 years. Again, in the future, that's, if you want to wait 20 years down the road for recreation there, then, maybe we're short-sighted to think it's all negative, but it seems like the impacts would be pretty great in the short term. Kip, do you have, that's all I have. Just wanted to give you an update on what was presented to the Conservation Commission.
Great, thank you. Jeff?
I'm not really quite sure where to begin. And I think probably the best thing for me to do is to keep a lot of my opinions to myself about it. One, I have no skin in the game. So, I do know Pat and I do know Matt, but I have no skin in the game. And so, I mean, I think that I'll narrow my comments to the one point which I think Mimi asked me about, which is truck traffic. And I'm not a traffic expert, but obviously the way in and out of there with truckloads of soil are up that access road. And, I don't think my opinion on that matter is any more valuable than anybody else on this call, this committee, or in this city. So, I think there's, there's two sides to the argument, and you know, my expertise would not lend itself to addressing those pros and cons. It's just it is not that complicated, and you know, it's so I'm in a little, you know, and you know, I think I'm going to stop there. I don't want to say too much. It's like this, you know, I have other business interests, and
yeah, no, I'm sorry. I did not mean to put you on the spot.
Oh, no. I mean,
neither did I.
No, and I don't. I'm not on the spot because I won't go there. But just to be clear, you know, I mean, I think that, you know, I have probably a personal opinion about it, and I have a business interest that would, you know, maybe align but maybe conflict with each other. And it's just, I don't think this is, you know, and because Pat and Matt are friends of mine, I don't know. I don't have a whole lot to add. I think it is what it is. It's pretty simple. It's not a complicated matter. And, you know, I think it's do you leave a quarry there or do you fill the quarry? And I think there's probably pros and cons to both of those, and, you know, and right, pros and cons to both of them. So yeah, that's what and I don't really know much more, if any more than any of you guys do, from basically reading what I've read in the newspaper and heard talked about at this meeting. Actually, I've learned more about the project attending these meetings than I have anywhere else, including the paper. So.
Well, let me bring us back then to what this particular meeting is all about. And that is taking the information that we've garnered so far in our research, seeing how each of the things affects the other as far as properties on the mountain go, and how they would affect the Whiting Street Reservoir itself, so that we can move forward and decide where we need to go for further research, and then what we want to take to a public hearing. And I think it's going to take more than this meeting for us to come up with all of that. But again, what we're interested in is what we've learned and making lists of things that we want to make sure we incorporate in a final discussion.
So Alan, I have a question, and that is just that, you know, we've invited the other you know, adjacent landowners, you know, to come here and speak to us about this, and we didn't include Matt and Pat in that discussion. I mean, is that something? I mean, we know what, you know, they've already, again, they haven't made an official filing on what they're going to do there, but is it something? I mean, obviously, this is something that could have a lot of impact on both the any recreational uses in the general area, and could have impacts on, you know, the water quality related issues. So is it something, do we want those guys to come and talk to us like we've invited others, or is it, you know, again, it's a hot issue because it's in, you know, because there are things, you know, they were in bankruptcy court this week. There, you know, it was in the newspaper. It's, you know, the issue went to city council and strange things happened there. So is it something, you know, we're not trying to throw ourselves in the middle of a controversy, but do we want to have a dialogue about this to really understand what's going on beyond what we understand? That's all.
I think we should wait and see what the outcome is. They may or may not own it.
And to me, yeah, Dave, I think, you know, the thing that we don't know yet with respect to, you know, the site is until we know what the court's decision is,
Right.
we won't then know what the potential impacts are, either on the, you know, access road or so we can't judge, you know, because whatever happens will one way or another, you know, impact in some way the reservoir or the use of the reservoir potentially somehow.
I agree.
Right.
And, you know, like we've gathered, you know, information, we've heard from, you know, a number of different people. And I think you know, Sue Ellen is correct. I think what we need to be doing is thinking about what have we learned from the adjacent properties and the abutters and from the work that's been done at the reservoir, and how does that impact, or how might those impact the ability to more broadly define usage or increase recreational use or something for the reservoir, you know, because we're, you know, I mean, our task is to prepare some recommendations for the city council on the reservoir. And we started down this road with all the abutters because clearly this is just part of, you know, this is one piece of a whole big thing. So, you know, you can't make it just, you know, we can't make recommendations in isolation without, you know, understanding more. So we need to be careful we don't go over into territory that's not ours to determine.
I agree. I agree. You're right.
I think basically that's what Jeff said in asking the question. And what I'm hearing is perhaps we might tuck that away and see if it becomes important to the needs we have for information in order to make ultimate recommendations. It's a major point. Certainly if they wanted to be a part of these discussions, we would want their input. But right now, again, I think as everyone says, Dave said very clearly, we don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
I would just point out, though, that it is the most potentially immediately impactful thing, in, you know, in the area. So I don't think we can necessarily close our eyes to it. And since we are operating on behalf of the city council to some degree, I think we at least again, I do not really want to go down this road. But I do think it's, we need to just be aware because it is potentially impactful. And I don't know why the city council dealt with things the way they did the last time, but if they came to us and asked us what should be done with regard to this, you know, again, it might be hard to have an opinion on this. I recognize that, but I do think we at least should, again, it seems like it could be the most immediately impactful thing to the area. And I don't think we can ignore it. That's all I would say to us.
I agree. I feel the same way I did earlier, but I think obviously awareness is our job. Awareness of anything that's possible that could or is not going on. But I really think, Jeff, it's in limbo. It belongs in limbo. And there's nothing's going to happen there, regardless of who owns it, that isn't going to impact the reservoir and be regulated. And it'll in some ways, it'll be forever protected because both ends of that property drain to two different areas, of one being Whiting's and one being Gray Lake. So whoever tries to do anything is going to have a lot of regulation on their hand. I don't want to become a cheerleader from either side. That's my point. That's me.
It occurs to me I would be very curious, and perhaps they're not in a position to want to say anything at this point, but I'd be very curious to hear what the water department thinks. Because in large part, that is one of the biggest issues here is going to be, what the impact of that project, if it does happen, would have on the reservoir. And so, I'd like to know more about their position, because that could really affect, well, obviously it's going to affect the reservoir and the recreation around the reservoir.
Mm-hmm.
Have we heard any more from the water department?
Not a word.
I'll try again.
And I will admit, I goofed this time for this meeting. And I forgot to add Mr. Manzi to the invitation list. I will not let that happen again. Do you all think that it might be a good idea to start making a list of the concerns that we've heard from various owners and abutters?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Concerns and I would say concerns and opportunities.
Yeah.
Good and the bad.
Yeah.
And the other.
Because the gate was both a concern and an opportunity, but it should be listed in both places.
Keep going.
I don't know. I think you should slow down so I can capture some of this stuff. I'm not a court stenographer.
You're not?
Me either. I'm having trouble keeping up.
So our last call, we were also, informed a little bit about the tower folks. So I know that that's another avenue of information we need to seek out somewhere, the SBA stuff.
I was surprised to hear that name, okay, because I had a lot to do with the towers that were on the ski area. And the SBA was a competing firm and didn't have any stake there at all. Now, maybe the television station property has hired them to be monitors or caretakers. I don't know, but the property on the ski area was not. SBA had nothing to do with it. Maybe they do now, but my experience with those companies would I can't imagine they would be willing to be much help to a group like us, unless you lock the gate on them.
Then they'll be very helpful.
Then they'd be very helpful.
Well, that information, Dave, came from Josh Knox.
Well, I've been out of there a long time.
Yeah. So, I mean, whatever, I guess we all know about the towers up there came from Josh last meeting.
Yeah, it's okay.
So,
I was just surprised.
Somebody else had mentioned that in a prior meeting.
Did that?
I mean, Josh, yes, you're right, Josh, but I know that wasn't the first time I had heard it. Are we at this point, I'm sorry, Sue Ellen, are we using time now to try to make this list of concerns and opportunities?
Well, as they come up, I'm jotting things down, certainly.
I mean, I thought a great opportunity we heard about was the potential for linkage with the Appalachian Trail and perhaps the Park Service around the New England Trail and the possibilities for trailhead work or other amenities that might come to the area because of the New England Trail.
Agree.
Agreed.
And we talked with Pat Murphy at Wyckoff about potentially using some of their space for parking and access.
Yeah, that was great. That was really great.
Right. And maybe an opportunity to sell them some water also. So I think
that was great.
Right. And Eric, presented some opportunities, I think, also to work with him and improve access, and maybe some parking over there.
I think that just that if the abutters could just have some kind of formal meeting, even if it's once or twice a year, just to keep in touch with each other and all be on the same page was good, beneficial for them too.
Yeah, I mean, there used to be that group of partners or neighbors that got together periodically, but they hadn't gotten together now in a bunch of years, but they did used to all communicate or coordinate a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember who people mentioned who could be the most likely convener for that abutters group? I know I asked that to Josh specifically, but I don't remember exactly his response.
I think he skirted that issue.
Yeah, but he mentioned Yanni's name.
He did, yeah. Yeah.
I think he said that the trustees and the Boys and Girls Club were the ones that got together in the house, maybe?
The previous conveners, yeah.
Right.
Well, and people also said the city of Holyoke was a convener previously.
The water department?
I think it was more likely not. I don't think it was the water department. I think it might have been planning, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, maybe planning. Yep.
But I'm not sure. I have to say, I really don't know.
Yeah, they called themselves the Mount Tom Partners or something.
Yeah.
Do we have thoughts on who would be best to convene such a group? Guess that maybe is in recommendations later.
And just to note that in our request to the PVPC, one of the items that they will hopefully be able to get to in the 15 hours, and if they can't, hopefully they will help us find more funding. I mean, one of the things we're asking for is some models of how one might, precedents about how one might put together a multi-organizational or multi-landowner effort to how you would do that, how you would fund it, what your documents might be to make it work. So in theory, we're going to get some good models from them about that.
Yeah, we were looking for, organizational or multi-jurisdictional or, because everybody's interests here are going to be a little bit the same and a little bit different.
Boy, do I wish I knew shorthand.
So does Jeff.
Exactly.
I'll drop off my pages of notes tomorrow.
Have we thought about the content of what we might want to discuss at a public meeting? Not what all the information is exactly, but have we thought about collectively at the what the content might want to be at a first meeting or a second meeting, or because that might help us think about how to prepare or gather, pieces of information we don't have yet.
So, Sue Ellen, go ahead. It looked like you were going to say something.
No, I wasn't going to say anything. Go ahead, Jeff.
So just like we just spoke of, it seems like it would be wise for us to just very simply lay out the issues we've identified, the opportunities we've identified. And we could go a step further and think about and have, draft recommendations. That's moving along, so I don't know, but, so that would be, if we were going to, we have to, seems like we would have to have something. Well, let me back up. There's two reasons to have a meeting, either for input from the general public or
right.
to indicate to them what it is, what we've found, our findings to this point. So we have to first decide which of those two we want to.
Right. So, that's a question. Do we think we want to get input from the public on what they think potential uses might be, or
I think Jeff probably was right on the money there, because I think if you just open it up, what would you like? You'll have people, speedboats and fishing. And so I think if you can give parameters or boundaries, because otherwise I think you're just going to get a million different things that probably will never happen there. So.
Yeah, for us that have been through the public process, but we take more of a risk, as you know, Terry, to lay out. But if we lay out draft recommendations, you'll certainly know what people think about them.
Yeah, that's when I think that at least gives people a better idea of what you're asking too. If you're asking lay people, what would you like there? It's probably not going to be what this committee has found out what could happen there.
Right. Yeah.
I'm gonna argue that I think we should open the door to the public, come in and say anything that they want to, any crazy idea that they have, whether it's viable or not.
Kip, I do too, but I think to start out, it's just better to give them a little, talk about some of the restrictions and that we don't even own the property either. Oh. And then let people absorb that a little before. Then, yeah, of course, you can't stop them. But yeah.
I hearken back to, I like the draft. I think that's a good course. I don't even argue with what Kip's saying, but every meeting, every public hearing, everything we do should start with what Sue reminds us of. A, Terry, we don't own it. B, let's have Mr. Conti make a film of exactly what he said to us. So before anybody says that scuba diving is a really good idea, let's say that over and over again.
Yeah.
So I missed the meeting that I think Crystal Barnes attended, which was I think in response to my question about actually really control of the reservoir. Now,
correct.
And so forgive me, but my question is, okay, I understand that the water department owns the reservoir. The water department is managed by a board, correct?
Correct. Commissioners.
Who do they answer to?
Jesus.
Sorry?
Jesus. They answer to nobody. That's part of the issue.
Yeah. They're a pseudo city.
They're pseudo, yeah.
Yeah. So it would be the mayor or the council, I guess, constituents.
And who do they answer to?
Who?
All of us, the voters.
Constituents, yes, correct.
The voters, right? So
Well, and state laws and federal laws.
Yeah, of course.
So, and she talked about like the, Article 97 wetlands protection requirements that they are responsible to work with.
Right. On top of that, and I don't even know where I put my notes on this yet.
Yes.
And I think it may have been Kip who found the document and suggested we all look at it. The water department has a binding set of agreements on conservation of the reservoir. And one of the things that we have to remember, or we have to check on, is where those agreements stand. In reading it so far, I didn't get the feeling that they were finalized. It was all a "we are going to" kind of statement. So maybe we need to get the water department and Mr. Condi back in here to talk about that. They may already have restrictions that don't allow for anything except some passive recreation like walking, photography.
Well, we know it's under Title 97 for one. So there are those issues.
So I'm not familiar with that Title 97, but my recollection is that that's tied to the fact that it's a reservoir, correct? Like that it's even though it's a backup reservoir, there's certain restrictions around that. And I think that that is a great question. Like, what are those restrictions? Because I do think that probably unanimous position of this committee or close to it that, that those its status as a backup reservoir should remain in place. That it's, as a water resource, it's extremely valuable. But, can you swim in that? Can you fish in that and be in compliance with those rules? And although the water department is not going, very simple and clear to me. The water department's job, right, is to protect that as a water resource. Dave Conti said to us very clearly, I think if it was up to them, they probably wouldn't even let people go there and walk around. People leave trash and they're concerned about more people coming. And, so they would be inclined to putting a big fence around that thing and not having anybody go there and do anything. Now, where's the compromise between what they as a water department should do? And I think what they're taking that position that they should take. That's their jurisdiction, right? I think that the city, you go to the other extreme, there's probably people that would like to see swimming and fishing and canoeing and anything else on that body of water, and more hiking and who knows what else, camping or events or whatever up there, have it be more of a recreational use. So there's kind of this competition between those two positions. And I think my point about, opening it to the public to say, come in and tell us what your ideas are, what you would like to see there. Maybe that has to be constrained by what the absolute responsibilities are, the firm line to stay in that chapter or Title 97. So
I just want to point out that that's another item on our list for the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission to look at, is what exactly are the legal, what is legally allowable in terms of the state guidance, because as we talked about before, there's certain things, for instance, that are allowed on the Quabbin that are just not going to fly at Whiting Street, but they seem to be legally permissible. Therefore, really, what is the legal what's legally allowable. Now, the water department may obviously decide something more restrictive than that, but what's the absolute limits? So they are going to find that out for us as part of their precedent.
Good, that would be helpful.
Yeah, and I was going to say, in terms of the visioning piece of it, I think it is interesting to open up for public comment the pie in the sky visioning, because even though some pieces of what people might really want to see might not be allowable right around the reservoir, we are now also talking about the whole side of the mountain as a potential partnership, and some things that people want might be able to be put at a different position, a different place on a different abutters property, because there are a number of people here who seem to be potentially willing to work together to create an amenity that would be accessible to people.
So I think at one point we talked about the process, and the process being, you know, that we would first talk to abutters and listen to what they had to say, and then go more broadly out to the public and see what the public has to say. And I know Dave Moore is concerned about that turning into a circus, but I don't know how to prevent that from happening, and perhaps we should just be prepared for a little bit.
You can't really prevent it from happening, so.
Just let it go and hear what people have to say. And
well, I guess I'm a little confused now. What our mission was to think about the reservoir. So we collected the information, but now are we expanding, like, Kate, you just said like the whole side of the mountain. So are we expanding what should happen in the area? Like, what is our focus?
I mean, I think I'm talking
Reservoir.
I'm sorry, but I don't see anybody else talking. And I think, Terry, what we decided was that, you know, we needed to look at it in order to really do a thorough job of evaluating what the opportunities were at the reservoir. We had to look at it more holistically. How does it fit into the neighborhood and with the abutter? So, you know,
yes. So the recommendations are really on the reservoir, but understanding that there's going to be a tangential impact, either based on what the abutters are doing or what we're, you know, we want to make sure that we're, you know, understanding all the pieces that you can't look at the reservoir by itself. It's just impossible to not, because it's too close. There's too many neighbors and there's too much stuff. So just needing to understand the context of that resource.
You know, I think it's helpful, you know, so I don't think Kate and Terry were here in the very initial conversations. Right. And Marcos was, you know, part of the first two meetings. And Marcos really wanted to do a major, you know, a study of the whole area. Mm-hmm. And we, you know, we weren't against that, but that was not, I mean, we went over what the council asked us to do, the charge that they gave us, and that was beyond that. And so we said, well, we can go back to the council and ask for that greater charge. And we said, well, at this point, no, let's just focus on what we were asked to do. Now, just to think this through a little bit, we could make a recommendation that a major area study be done, and that would be, you know, we could lay out the, you know, the key issues we've identified. We could lay out, you know, opportunities and risks to the area, and say, here are what, and one of those recommendations could be that, to have a major area study. I think we recognize that maybe that's necessary, but it's probably not it was not the charge we were given.
Okay.
Hopefully that's somewhat helpful.
But
that's very helpful.
Before I forget, and kind of circling back to opportunities discussions, that opportunity of putting the reservoir into perpetual conservation and getting paid out of DCR. I'm going to make sure we have that on the list of opportunities.
So say that again, Kip, so I can capture that. Sorry.
That's the opportunity of generating some revenue from placing the reservoir into a
Conservation.
Yeah.
Somewhat like West Springfield did.
Oh, right, exactly. Okay.
Right, correct. Right, because it is protected now as a reservoir, but as we were talking, you can undo that, and then development could happen, but you can't undo that permanent conservation restriction, and therefore there was an opportunity to generate some revenue there. And then the other one also, we had talked a little bit about, Kate, was the social justice aspect of it, that there might be some money available to, what's the word, to what, to make open space accessible.
Yeah.
So, and we clearly meet that definition of the social justice community. So just thinking about opportunities, I think, I got the sense that a lot of our charge was like, more a cash, like what kind, could you sell water? Could you develop land? Could you generate revenue from these other things? And I think that, the trailhead and the state park and the social justice money and putting the land in permanent conservation are under that list of opportunities that we talked about.
Well, I suspect selling water is probably the most potentially lucrative, although right. you'd have to build an aquifer. I mean, you'd have to build an aqueduct to transfer the water. So that's pretty significant cost. You were talking about Kip maybe just right next door, but if you remember when the water department came, they were talking about the potential of selling it to, Chicopee or South Hadley.
Right. Well, there's also, there's tankers of water too that, and I'm not saying I think that's a good idea, but, people do sell water for companies that fill up pools, and, I don't know what other bulk water sales opportunities there may or may not be. But if we talk about these things as purely opportunities that we've identified, not necessarily good or bad, but just opportunities, then selling water, I mean, when you look at it, right, there's not a lot there. You could sell land. I don't think that's a good idea. You could sell some water. That's probably a good and bad idea. You can put some land into a permanent conservation. You can tap some of these other resources for, the federal government, Park Service, or some other sources. Those I think are the opportunities. Then, could you do other things like generate revenues by, I don't know, put a pavilion there and have, lease it out to people for, again, I don't necessarily think that's a good idea, but I think that and that's when I'm going to come back around to why I think it's a good idea to really, probably constrain the public with what the law says, with an assumption that this is staying inside that chapter or Title 97 designation. What can you do? Can you fish? Can you swim? Can you charge for parking? Can you sell passes? Like what kind of, because I really got a sense that this charge was really about, in response to the cost of upgrading the spillway and some dam work. Well, how do we pay for that? Maybe there's some opportunities up on this property to help pay those costs, which.
That's what I think too, Kip. That's kind of where they were going when they started this.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think the idea of passes and parking fees, I think that's terrific. And then one other thing I would think about before the public gets to do their thing with us is what I've heard is that maybe the PVC, Pioneer Valley Planning Commission study is going to go into other places, other areas that have reservoirs offline and what they may have developed or not developed, because I think it's essential that the committee knows some of that stuff before someone else finds it out and says, why didn't you look that up? Mm-hmm. So I think that's real important, and it would be helpful. And we might be ready to answer any kind of question that someone has about scuba diving or whatever else they want to do in there. But we better not find out that we didn't check it out.
Yeah.
Right. And under that, Dave, I mean, like you said, we don't have any idea how much money we could make by selling water to a adjacent jurisdiction. We don't. Now, somebody probably knows that. And we don't have any idea. And again, I mentioned Chapter 97, Kip, earlier, but that's only one of the protections. Remember, the much more stringent, that only is a protection for a public good, a land use that's kept for the public good. And that's more of a tax constraint, I believe. But, the real, I suspect, restrictions are because this is a water supply reservoir in reserve. And so that those regulations, I'm sure, but again, it's in reserve. So I suspect they're not as great as it would be if it were, if it were currently functioning, but I suspect they're similar. We didn't talk about that. We don't know that.
Right. And MWRA is a huge governing body for all those kind of waterways, every one of them. But again, if someone said there's 20 reservoirs just like yours, and this is how they did it, whether we could ever afford it or not, who knows? But it would be good to know if anyone's done anything, especially with the windfall that we're lucky enough to have the Pioneer Valley study it. They're good at it. And let's hope they can do it, and let's hope they can hurry it up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I wouldn't wait our taking public comment for that, because I think that those two things, we want to hear back from the Planning Commission before we make our recommendations, but they're not going to have their recommendations into us right away. I think it would be better to move ahead with getting some public comment, at least a sort of first round of public comment.
All right.
Before we.
And so maybe the first meeting then is to, communicate what our charge is and, what the charge is, what the restrictions are. And then what do you think?
Yeah, and maybe I'll add into it, what the abutters have said to us. We've met with these abutters, and this is what their comments were. Summarize that and
stand back
and put Dave out front to.
No, come on, Kip, you.
Yeah.
So I don't have the patience.
But I think if we're sort of presenting, if we're making a brief presentation, I think it might be interesting. I haven't looked at it recently, but to think about whether there's anything in there's so many times when people have given public comment on things like our open space and recreation plan or the city master plan. And, we have some already visioning documents. There might be, maybe somebody could take some time to try to pull out things from previous visioning that's been done in the city that we think might help frame the discussion.
That sounds like a good job for the planning department.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so Kate, when did you say Valley Planning Council could help us with the 15 hours they have?
They have 6 hours during this fiscal year. And the remaining 9 they'll be able to hopefully do at the beginning of the next fiscal year.
June 30th, fiscal end?
Yeah. And Karin thought that she could probably, if I'm remembering correctly, I think she thought she could probably do the general precedent review of what were other, good examples we could look to within the 6 hours, but she wouldn't have any kind of report for us. She might be able to, hand me a whole bunch of information that then I could try to translate to people, but there's not, she's not going to have any report for us at the end of this fiscal year.
Yeah, I mean, we just asked them for some, information. We didn't ask for a report or anything.
Let's tell them how important it is, and say please.
Well, we did. One of the possible things near the end might be, and this is on our list of we hope we can cover all of these, but to put those kind of precedents and examples into a presentable form that we could show to the city council, or the public. But that deliverable, if we decide we definitely want it, is not going to come till like the end of the process. Right. Certainly not going to come in the first 6 hours.
I just wonder if they could help us get ready for our public hearing. So if we could do it, I just wonder, again, you and Marlene have had the conversation, so I don't want to, but I just wonder if it would be helpful though for us to lay out these, key issues, but potential risks and opportunities, and then have them, again, things like revenue opportunities, which of those things can they, investigate a little bit to help us present those things so we just know a little bit more about these potential options. It seems like that's the piece that's right in front of us. I don't
absolutely.
They may not be as excited about that. I don't know, because that's not as forward looking. It's more of the grunt stuff. Just, okay, if you were going to put this into, again, they're not appraisers either, but if we were going to put this into conservation, what's the even if they just looked at what Westfield was, what's the likely price tag? If we were going to sell water, to an adjacent town, what's the likely revenue potential for that, and what's the cost of getting it there? Just, what did another town do? Those kind of key, just ballpark. So we're inside Fenway Park when we talk about this.
Right.
My guess is that based on the list of things we've already asked them to do, that kind of research is something that's in a follow-up request that they are hopefully going to help us identify some ways that we might get some funding for more work. But I think that's when that's going to happen. But I also don't think we need to have that information before we're doing our public hearings, before we're talking to the public. I think my feeling is that talking to the public is really trying to get their ideas, not at this point lay out a whole plan for them.
Yeah, that's what I think.
And I think Kip said it. I'd like to know, what are the restrictions right now for the reservoir? Because I really don't know if people can legally fish or swim or kayak.
The restriction on the reservoir is they have no permitted uses whatsoever.
Oh, I know. But is that by law?
Yes.
Yeah. They turn their head away and just allow walkers or runners at the reservoir.
Oh, I know.
And they are under all constraints that there are to keep that water as clean as it possibly can be kept.
Okay.
So that if it is needed for public consumption, it can be so used.
Okay. So that means no state fishing by state law or the water department policy? Because I really don't know.
I think it's water department policy. I don't think there's the state law, because Quabbin has other uses.
Yeah, but that would be
allow
helpful for us to know, because I really don't know.
Again, I think the the PVPC is going to find that out for us, but that we don't need to have that before we talk to the public, at least to gather opinions.
Mm-hmm.
If, for those of us who were there when Dave Conti spoke to us, I think you'll remember that as far as the water department is concerned, anything that could be allowed at the reservoir is stuff that they're turning their heads and looking the other way about now. Conservation restriction, I think we got a feeling about that from, I believe it was Jennifer Howard, when we talked about Bear Hole.
Right.
They were getting $1 million for that. That is what, 15,000 acres? We are talking at the reservoir about 280 acres. Harry, am I right?
Believe that's pretty much on there. Yeah. I think that was
so
right.
It would be a much smaller area going into conservation and a slightly different kind of area. We have the fastest recharge to a reservoir on that acreage, including the reservoir, that there is anywhere. And it's a reservoir where Bear Hole was basically a huge series of connected wetlands.
I think Dave Conti was saying that they all for passive recreation with the idea of holding the reservoir as a standby all the way into the future as far as anybody can see. And that's their stand on it right now.
That's exactly what he said.
Yeah, keep it at least, a standby reservoir, but with the opportunity in a short period of time to put it online. Because I know last year in that chlorinating station, as you come in from Mountain Park, they spent Boyer Electric was there when I was riding my bike in there. I saw him in there 3 or 4 times with a couple trucks. So they put a lot of money into that building to have it all set to go online fairly quickly.
Well, that was required of them. That wasn't money they wanted to spend.
Yeah.
That in order to keep the status that they want, they were forced by MWRA to do it, and that's why they did it. And now it has the status.
Do you think they're taking just a step at a time so they can eventually, bring in revenue from these sources? Do you think they're, the spillway, because if you looked at the price tag for doing the chlorination facility and then doing the spillway, everyone would absolutely balk. But then once those things are done, then you can take the next step to, I'm just, do they have a plan that we're unaware of?
That is a really, really, really good question.
I can ask good questions. I wish I had some answers.
Well, I think Dave Conti said that the spillway and the dam are going to be redone next year in 2022.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, he said, didn't he say they were putting it out even like this spring, putting it out to bid or something?
Going out to bid in September.
Yeah, it is, and it's gonna get bonded, and the reservoir is going to be closed to every entity, okay, because it's going to be a construction safety hazard. But Jeff, I've just got to go ask him that question. I do.
That'd be good.
Would you repeat that, Dave? I didn't get it from my notes.
Yeah, I think that Jeff's question about the fact that certainly I, as much as I love the water department, have underestimated any future that they'd ever have other than what they do. And Jeff has opened my eyes to say maybe they're way ahead of us. And they're thinking of making all these monster improvements on a tiny piece of land, property, that maybe they've got some plan that I can torture him out of. I don't know, but I'm going to ask it because it's a brilliant question. Okay. Or are they just being regulated into doing it for no other reasons than downstream safety?
Well, I think safety with the dam is clearly the driver.
Absolutely.
Spillway, for the spillway.
Well, that's
spillway.
Spillway is dam safety related.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I bet you're right about the chlorination too, that in order to maintain a status as a backup drinking water, they had to put that chlorination facility, make sure that it was working.
Oh yeah. They did, right. They didn't do that.
It would be good if someone from the water department was here to tell us whether we're right or wrong in our.
Well, I think without defending anybody, I think he did. But let's keep in tab. I'm disappointed that they stopped coming. But with everyone, if it's okay, I'm going to talk to them and get them, try to drag them back in.
Okay, then you're the emissary.
I am.
And the information gatherer.
Right.
Okay, you are our ambassador to the water department.
Oh man, oh man.
Yep.
It's a good thing. You can do it.
Oh, geez.
That'll teach you to speak so authoritatively.
I can't help it. I'm sorry.
What you get for asking good questions, Jeff.
Yes. You created a whole new structure, and I demand an automobile and a bag.
Yeah, and with that same automobile, you're going to get a driver, a
secretary, of course,
and a per diem for your meals.
Which started when this committee started, exactly.
Right, and it's going to continue at the same level.
$0 per diem.
That's the one.
Exactly right.
Okay.
Okay, any other thoughts that we want to get Funk?
So what are we doing at the meeting on the 18th?
More of this.
Okay.
I'm gonna, if I hear from Dave Comeau on when he wants to do the tour, I will send an email and let everybody know.
Okay, and we will have Michael Curtin with us to talk about gas and electric department.
Unless we scared him away.
I'm here.
I think he's still here.
So that, that will be tremendously helpful too, to have that viewpoint.
And before I forget, again, we were talking about opportunities. I want to make sure to mention, the CPA money that's there is another opportunity to tap into to be able to make some improvements. I'm not sure, studies are hard, but they may not be impossible. I'm not.
You know what, though? There's going to be a ton of money coming out of the administration for a while. So,
Source, right. But,
and they're big on equity and inclusion. So we could do a whole, what's the environmental justice take on doing this that way?
So Sue Ellen, does that mean, so next week the plan is really to lay out these very specifically kind of the opportunities and the issues, the opportunities.
Yeah, that would be good.
The risks and maybe, and then after that we could, that's as far as we'll get. I mean, we have these, the ones that I heard, I'll try, I'll send those to you, Sue Ellen, after I'm finished, or you can send me your stuff and I can try to put it in, whatever.
I think the easiest way might just be for me to drop it off.
Okay.
I have a contractor showing up any minute now.
Well,
early warning dog device.
If you disappear, we'll know what happened.
Is Ginger doing all right?
He's doing just fine, but she just bounced up and went running around the house. So we'll see.
Okay. All right.
I didn't think Peter was a very good contractor.
Not that guy. No, he's home. I'm here in Rhode Island.
Okay.
So you're right next to our refuge there in Ninigret National Wildlife Refuge. Yep.
I am.
Pretty area.
I'm between Ninigret and Trustums.
Yeah. It's nice.
Okay, does anybody have anything else that they want to add to this right now?
Did I get all the guests, both Memi and Michael? Are they the only two guests tonight?
Yes,
yes, they are.
Do I understand that I'm doing the minutes next week, next meeting?
I believe so.
Okay.
But I will double check that and put that in the meeting notice.
Okay, thank you.
As well as adding Mr. Manzi back in.
Yeah.
Evan helped me. All right, everybody has the responsibility of making sure I don't goof any of that up.
Yes, ma'am.
So if I do,
Don't worry.
Have it. Anything else tonight?
I'm good.
Okay, then if somebody would like to move to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Let everybody go eat their dinner.
Yes.
Can I have a second?
Yes.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Thanks for the good discussion.
Yeah, that was
Thanks, guys.
great.
It was
That
great.
was good.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye all.